Our top story tonight on Gravitas is about the new nuclear arms race, threatening global stability. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has made it clear that the country is set to abandon a moratorium on deploying intermediate and shorter-range nuclear missiles. What's the catalyst, you ask? According to Lavrov, the United States planned deployment of similar weapons across various regions. And now Russia's move directly endangers the last remnants of a Cold War-era arms control framework. In fact, fueling fears of a fresh nuclear arms race among countries such as the US, Russia, China. Before we go any further, it's important to first understand how much nuclear arsenal the countries possess. And just to put this into perspective with Lavrov's statements, both Russia and the US have more than 5,000 nuclear warheads each. Together, they dominate the nuclear landscape, controlling 90% of global nuclear arsenals. China, while lagging way behind with around 600 warheads, is rapidly modernizing and expanding its arsenal. Like we told you early this month, according to a Pentagon report, China has added more than 100 warheads in the past year alone, and the PLA is projected to possess over 1,000 warheads by 2030. So any kind of declaration that opposes arms control is alarming, not just for the countries involved, but for the entire world that may be engulfed in a nuclear chain reaction, posing catastrophic consequences. As per reports, Lavrov justified the policy shift, stating that the US has arrogantly ignored warnings from Russia and China and has effectively initiated the deployment of such weapons in various parts of the world. The statement perhaps highlighting the worsening relationship between Washington and Moscow, which, by their own admission, is now at its lowest point since the Cold War. The US plans to install missiles in Germany by 2026. These long-range missiles reportedly include SM-6, Tomahawk, and the developmental hypersonic weapons. As per reports, the collapse of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019 has been a precursor to these developments, signed in 1987 by then US President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. The INF Treaty not just eliminated the production of an entire class of nuclear weapons, but also marked the first time the superpowers had agreed to reduce their nuclear arsenals. Since then, it reportedly served as a major foundation for global arms control. But in 2018, then President Donald Trump announced his intention to actually withdraw from the pact, citing alleged Russian violations and concerns over China's missile capabilities, with Moscow denying the accusations and dismissing them as a pretext for US withdrawal. Russia, in response, imposed its own moratorium on the development of missiles banned under the INF Treaty. These basically included ground-based ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. But now that restraint is gone. Lavrov made it clear the moratorium is quote-unquote no longer practically viable and will have to be abandoned, perhaps signaling a dangerous new future where tit-for-tat nuclear missile deployments and production could become the norm. Now, in practical terms, this means Russia could deploy these weapons deeper in its Baltic enclave of Kaliningrad, something which was barred in the moratorium and could directly threaten the security of Europe. You see, Russian Iskander missiles are already stationed in Kaliningrad and Belarus, while longer-range weapons like the Orishnik ballistic missile could be stationed deeper in Russian territory, which basically makes much of Europe in its range. The US, in fact, has reportedly already tested missiles with capabilities similar to those banned by the INF Treaty. So will Russia initiate countermeasures is the immediate question, further fueling the nuclear arms race. And what about China, for that matter? While its nuclear arsenal is significantly smaller, unlike the US and Russia, Beijing is not a party to treaties like the INF, giving it free rein to develop nuclear missiles which only further complicates the situation, as the US and Russia may also have to consider China in their strategic calculations. The implications of Russia abandoning its unilateral missile moratorium are profound. An unchecked nuclear arms race raises the likelihood of miscalculation with the pursuit of superiority, creating a precarious balance where one misstep could lead to catastrophic consequences. Not just that, the crumbling of the arms control agreement signaling a dangerous shift. Treaties like the INF and New START were basically designed to prevent precisely this scenario. New START, as it's called, is a nuclear arms reduction treaty signed between the US and Russia that came into effect in 2011. And with the New START treaty set to expire in 2026 and reportedly no strategic dialogue on the horizon, Russia, the US and the world face the prospect of a complete collapse in arms control frameworks. Without a commitment to renewed dialogue in arms control, the world may be hurtling towards an unprecedented era of nuclear competition, and the stakes could not be higher. One misstep, miscalculation, or an impulsive decision could actually leave millions around the world vulnerable to the devastating consequences of a nuclear war. And just a few days to go as far as Joe Biden's term as the President of the United States is concerned, and he has unrolled another aid package for Ukraine. The White House saying that Biden announced a fresh package of nearly $2.5 billion in aid to Ukraine for its defense against Russian aggression. Biden said that he is proud to announce almost $2.5 billion in security aid to Ukraine as the Ukrainian people continue to defend their independence and freedom from Russian aggression. Now, in his statement on U.S. support for Ukraine, Biden stated that the aid includes an additional $1.25 billion drawdown package for the Ukrainian military and a $1.22 billion Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative package. Washington has committed billions of dollars in aid for Ukraine since the war between Moscow and Kiev started. However, it is uncertain if the aid will continue at that level under Donald Trump, who will make a comeback to the White House on the 20th of January. On to South Korea now, which is grappling with its worst air disaster as the Boeing crash claimed 179 lives at Muan International Airport. The incident marks the deadliest plane crash worldwide in 6 years, triggering immediate safety concerns and scrutiny of both airport infrastructure and Boeing's troubled legacy. Our next story getting you all the details.
It is the world's deadliest plane crash in 6 years. Boeing 737-800 belly lands and skids off the end of the runway at Muan International Airport. These are the terrifying images of the Jeju Air Flight 2216 erupting in a fireball as it slammed into a wall. The plane was carrying 181 people from Thailand to South Korea. Only 2 survived the inferno. As black boxes are being scrutinized, but flyers are scared. A second Jeju Air flight from Seoul was forced to return after encountering a landing gear problem. Jeju Air says that about 68,000 flight reservations have been cancelled.
Fear and sadness come together, and honestly, it's the end-of-year holiday season now. Just last week, I flew to Jeju Island using that same airline, so perhaps that's why this feels so much more real and terrifying to me. The fear has been overwhelming, and I've been feeling down and scared all weekend, even up until now.
It's hard to imagine that an accident like this could happen to me just by taking a flight. But with this incident, I can't help but feel worried and cautious about flying in the future.
Bird strikes can cause fires inside the plane's engines, damaging critical systems which can render the landing gear inoperable, meaning the wheels don't come out to facilitate a smooth landing. Many aviation experts are also questioning why there was a wall at the end of the runway in which the plane collided and turned into a fireball.
What we saw was, during the video of this landing, was we saw the aircraft being put down beautifully with wings perfectly level. It was sliding on its belly. It was going very fast because the pilot couldn't get the flaps down, possibly because the hydraulics had failed after a bird strike. But anyway, he had to land particularly fast. That's why the aircraft went over the end of the runway.
New Year celebrations across South Korea have been cancelled as the country observes 7 days of national mourning following the crash. The crash adds another dark chapter to Boeing's troubled history, following the controversial 737 MAX disasters that claimed 346 lives and cost the company $23 billion, while ceding market dominance to European rival Airbus. As the cause of the crash remains under investigation, and aviation experts are quick to distinguish Sunday's incident from the company's earlier safety problems. Bureau Report, WION.
India's space agency ISRO is all set for its final mission of the year 2024. This is the much-awaited space docking experiment. This is a mission that is crucial for India's future space endeavors like Chandrayaan-4 and the Indian Space Station. You see, space docking is a highly sophisticated feat that has been accomplished only by entities from the US, Russia, Europe and China. The Indian-made twin SpaceX satellites, weighing 220 kg each, are to be placed in orbit by the Indian workhorse PSLV rocket. The vehicle is to lift off from the first launch pad of the Indian spaceport Satish Dhawan Space Center in Sriharikota from India's southeast coast. The rocket launch is scheduled for 10 p.m. Indian Standard Time tonight, in just a short while from now. Almost 15 minutes after the launch, in fact, the satellites will separate from the rocket. They will be placed in an orbit that is 470 kilometers above planet Earth. Now, in addition to space docking, this mission also carries 24 space experiments developed by ISRO and Indian space startups. After the satellites are ejected, the final stage of the rocket will be used as a platform to host these experiments in space for a couple of months.
Space docking experiment, or SpaceX, which is the most sophisticated space experiment that India will be carrying out in an orbit very close to the Earth. Almost 15 minutes after the 10 p.m. liftoff, these satellites will be hurled into 470 kilometer orbit above the Earth, and from there these satellites will be ejected at a speed of almost 28,000 kilometers per hour, and thereon these satellites will grow further from each other. They'll actually move far apart. They'll be almost 20 kilometers apart as we progress. And over the next 6 to 10 days, what will take place is that these satellites will maneuver in such a way autonomously that they reduce the distance between them. They'll initially be 20 kilometers apart, and they'll almost come within touching distance over a week's time. And then both these satellites will autonomously dock with each other. And once they dock, they'll test their onboard systems. After testing their onboard systems, these satellites will completely grow apart, and then they will undock and they'll perform their respective roles of imaging the Earth.